All right. So Uday, can you go ahead and start us off with your introduction, a little bit of background about yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Uday Panikkar. I'm the Singapore country manager for Tractus Asia. We've been working with the EDPNC team for almost 5 years. It's been a great partnership. We've helped several North Carolina-based companies with their export efforts in Southeast Asia. I have been with Tractus for in this position for about 5 years as well, and covering everything from assisting, private sector companies, multinationals to medium-sized companies and small-sized companies to trade agencies like EDPNC and others. So I cover the entire range of services that our consulting firm has for everybody. But over the past, I would say 5 years, it has been heavily focused on economic development. And, we have been helping here on the ground, a lot of companies from the US, from North Carolina, across all of ASEAN. And my colleague Pei Wen is joining us tonight as well. So maybe I'll let her say a few lines about herself as well.
Thanks, Uday. Hi, I'm Pei Wen, and I joined Uday last year in 2022. So I joined as a research analyst, and I think I've seen some of you face to face in North Carolina, Kimo, as well as I think Bill, when I was there in North Carolina in July this year. So it's been 2 months, and it's really nice to see you guys here again. Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Pei Wen. Kathy, can you unmute yourself and make an intro? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Hi, I'm Kathy Thompson, and our company is DST Manufacturing. And we make a product that picks up spills. It's 100% safe. EPA loves it. And we've been very fortunate. We've been selling into Singapore for several years now, 7, I think, or 8. And that happened through a friend. However, the state of North Carolina has been unbelievable in the assistance. I did not know what I was doing. And it's a little scary because you hear all these, oh, this is going to happen, and just don't listen to anybody. Anybody that's listening to me, get in touch with these people in the state, because I've been in this business 13 years, and they've never ceased to amaze me how they really are. They helped me a lot. And shipping overseas can be fun. It doesn't have to be a nightmare. COVID did slow things down for everybody, but it's coming back. So, but we're fortunate. The product is excellent. I don't know, most of you Americans that are listening know Richard Petty. He does own a piece of this company. So that helped me a lot as well, having somebody like that. But this product is ridiculous. It comes from volcanoes. It is reusable on spills. You can throw it in the garbage, and you just can't find that. So it's one of those God things, and I'm lucky enough to have been the one chosen. So, but if anybody has any questions or anything, feel free and take this opportunity to work with this state, because a lot of states don't do what this state does.
That's true, Kathy. That's true. And I think Bill could attest to that, right, Bill, coming from New Jersey. So thank you. Yeah, so we're going to transition, and Uday and Pei Wen are going to start things off with kind of an overview of mega trends, and then I'll pose some questions so that we could dive in with a little bit more detail. So they're going to take it away with the overview. Thanks.
Sure. Before we go with, mega trends, maybe Pei Wen can give, like I always like to start every presentation on ASEAN about what ASEAN is. So Pei Wen, maybe we can give everybody some context on ASEAN, and then I'll cover a few points on some of the latest trends or what's going on here on the ground.
Yeah, of course. So ASEAN is made up of 10 countries, and we have like 634 million people just in this region alone. ASEAN is actually the world's third largest consumer market in terms of consumers number, just behind China and India. So it is also like a relatively young consumer market, and we have rising income as well as an expanding middle class here in the region. So But the different regions are actually very different from each other. So example, like Singapore may have a smaller market size. We only have 5.3 million people, but we actually have the highest GDP per capita. So it is important to cater solutions to the unique needs of each country within the ASEAN region. So another example is like Indonesia, whereby there's a significant market potential. There's a population of 273 million people, and there's a huge growing middle class as well as disposable income. So it is important to understand that there's a very diverse market characteristic across the 10 countries in ASEAN itself. Yeah. Back to you, Uday.
Thanks. And from a trends perspective, let's start with a little bit of some macro trade data. The US and ASEAN they were doing overall trade of about $360 billion in 2020, so in the middle of the pandemic. This went up to $440 billion in 2021. And just last year, it was about $505 billion of trade. This is overall trade between the two, between the US and the ASEAN region as a whole. So, there's been a steady increase since the pandemic. What does that tell us? It tells us that, this particular market, this region is ready for business. Companies are looking at it as a way to diversify away from China, right? Something that everybody is considering at the moment from a strategic point of view. And it's got excellent relations with the US. So it is a market which is open, which should be explored. And depending on your product, a market where you should know, get a little bit more intelligence about, understand where in ASEAN your product or service might fit. And this is where we can come in and help. Now, in terms of some, I would say, sector-based trends, there are a few things driving overall economic growth and confidence here in the region. The first thing is, the digital economy here in ASEAN. So like Payman was saying, there's about 600 million odd people here, out of which almost 430 are digitally connected. They have rising incomes, of course, different levels in different countries in ASEAN, but they have rising levels of income, big middle class that is very well connected to digital technologies, e-commerce. So they're buying things. They're buying things online. They're buying. They have a purchasing power that has been constantly increasing. Now, and the other thing that is we are seeing, come back is tourism. And, everybody knows about the gorgeous beaches of Thailand and in Malaysia and Indonesia. This is all open up now. It's all opened up. Tourism is picking up. What that does is it's going to have a positive knock-on effect to aviation, aerospace, hospitality, and food and beverage, right? And finally, I do have to say, the manufacturing industry in ASEAN is something that is picking up, especially in the automotive, specialty chemicals, and advanced manufacturing subsegments. So these are some of the areas, and of course there are others, but these are areas which are, pillars for a lot of the economies here. And we're seeing everything bounce back. We're seeing everything open and move fast aggressively. So depending on your product, please reach out to us or the ADPNC team and the right officer, and then we can see what we can do for you on the ground here. So I hope that covers some of the trends. But yeah, over to you, Melissa.
Great, thanks. So we're going to dive in a little bit deeper, and today's session is going to kind of compare and contrast two specific countries in the region. But if those folks that are participating have questions about other countries, that's fine. Put it in the chat. We're not limited to these countries, but that's our focus, our highlight. So my question to the panelists is, why did you specifically choose Singapore and Malaysia for today's talk?
Great. Let me start with Singapore. Now, I think when people think about Southeast Asia, Singapore is like the first name that comes into mind, and there's some reasons for that. It is one of the easiest places to do business, not just in Asia but in the world. It's a major global financial hub. You've got a ton of banks and private equity firms and other financial institutions situated here. They have the headquarters here. You've got, I think, about 7,000 different companies who have global companies who have their Asian regional headquarters in Singapore. So, Singapore's created an environment where everyone is welcome to come and do business. And it acts as a very easy, I wouldn't say very easy, but a more convenient gateway to the rest of the ASEAN market. Singapore almost acts like a trendsetter. So by that, what I mean is what Singapore is doing in terms of, regulations, in terms of trade, in terms of what it's, in terms of R&D, in terms of who it's choosing to trade with. Other ASEAN markets look at that, right? If your product is doing well in Singapore, chances are very high that, other markets are going to take note of that and would like that product in their market. So there's that that aura that Singapore has created over the past few years, which makes it a great gateway, and a great starting point. Now, on the flip side, like any other market, it has its challenges as well. It can be cost prohibitive. It can, it's a small market. It's about, like Pei Wen was saying, 5.3, almost 6 million people. So, it's great to start with, but then after that, companies tend to look at the bigger markets, right? Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam. So a great starting point. In terms of exports, I know the US does about over $50 billion worth of trade exports to Singapore. North Carolina is exporting a lot of aircraft parts, advanced machinery, chemical elements, I believe, and jewelry related precious metals related exports to Singapore, and there is scope to grow that a lot, right? You always have end users of these products that North Carolina is making here in Singapore. You've got decision makers based here, and so it is always going to be a market that North Carolina based companies should explore, depending on your product and depending on your ambitions. Like I was saying, it's a very easy place to do business. It's extremely business friendly, but you always have to do your research. You always have to have a good partner, and we'll get onto that more. But maybe I'll stop talking now and give it back to Pei Wen. Oh, one last thing. There is a US-Singapore free trade agreement, so that always helps.
Yeah, big help.
Go ahead, Pei Wen.
So by comparing Malaysia to Singapore is very different, because like Malaysia has an economy with strength in like manufacturing and like electronics, agriculture, and the most important thing different from Singapore is that they have their own natural resources. So this is where it becomes different. The other thing is that there's actually a growing middle class in Malaysia as compared to Singapore, because just now I mentioned Singapore actually has the highest GDP in the region per capita. So the Malaysia middle class, because it's expanding rapidly, it also means that there's an increase in purchasing power and a shifting consumption pattern. So this is where we can actually step in to help North Carolina companies export their products to Malaysia. So there's actually a lot of opportunities for exporters themselves. So export numbers wise, it's actually half of Singapore. There's only $22 billion that's from the United States, and North Carolina themselves are exporting around $0.5 million worth of goods into Malaysia. That's very little, so we can actually tap on this opportunity. But what we can see is that the highest number of exports from North Carolina to Malaysia is actually transistor, chemical wood pulp, aluminium waste. And this means that there's huge opportunities, because there's high demand for construction materials and logistical containers needs in Malaysia, because Singapore actually outsourced their construction needs to Malaysia. We have a lot of built to order flats, as well as building constructions. And why do Singapore outsource it? Is because of the lowered cost due to differences in currency. So currently Singapore's currency and Malaysia currency is one Singapore dollar to 1.34 Malaysian dollar. And that's why there is high demand for this kind of chemical wood pulp. The other thing is about diodes. So diodes is actually used in metal processing, and it's actually one of the biggest export from North Carolina to Malaysia as well. So these are actually opportunities that North Carolina companies can actually tap on. So for bilateral trade relations wise, there is actually a bilateral trade and investment framework agreement between US as well as Malaysia. So that can actually help you export your products as well into Malaysia.
Great.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks. I just wanted to point out those that are interested in the exact countries that the consulting firm that Uday and Pei Wen are charged to help North Carolina companies with feature. Look in the chat, Uday had put in addition to Singapore and Malaysia specifically, for your knowledge, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, and the Philippines. So I'm going to transition and ask Kathy a question. Kathy, can you tell us why your company chose to do business in Southeast Asia?
The person that introduced me to Mr. Chang, who is the person in Singapore, dealt with him in business and said it would be an awesome opportunity for us to export and to do it with a friendly person and somebody he knew. And he said, you won't lose anything in trying. So I tried, and it was a success instantly. The product, really, it's not hard to sell. And it's just getting it in front of somebody. And, you know, when you think of selling overseas and people looking just on a film, sometimes they can't really get the gist. And also shipping, I just send almost for now. So it just made sense. And the key, I think, too, in talking to people, it's not just your product, it's the friendships and the trust that you're going to build with these people, because that's something you got to have when you're dealing with overseas, is trust. And that's what we pride ourselves in at this company, is getting the people to look at the product. You know, I do, you know, a Zoom, and I do a demo myself even. And that's what we did with Mr. Chang, and Bob, the person that dealt with him, said, for me, said, hey, listen, Chang, he said, I use this product in Texas. We love it. You know, one container is not going to kill you. So that's what he did. He ordered his first container, and it went from there. And, you know, now they use it. They use it in their transportation systems. They have a big, huge bus company that swears by it. Now they're not only cleaning the street with it, but they're keeping it on the bus in case people get sick or spill something. And, you know, Singapore is a very clean country. I'm impressed with, you know, I've not been there, but people that have, and seeing the pictures, and they care about their health and everything. And Mr. Chang is really, really, really into that part of it, the green part of this product. And I thought, you know, what better way? Plus, he deals with people in Australia and other places, and that helps.
Mm-hmm. So it was very fortuitous for you. It was fortuitous. You had
a great point.
Well, and
Kathy
because
made is, oops, sorry, Kathy. I was just going to say, a great point you made was, you know, that focus on cleanliness in Singapore, and absolutely, you know, you get fined hundreds of dollars if you litter. That's why it's super clean here. But, you know, outside of that, you mentioned, you know, people are focusing on sustainable products, and this is another trend that you see in places like Singapore, in places like Thailand and Malaysia. Sustainability is something which is becoming more and more important.
Hey, that was a perfect transition, Uday, because I want to talk about just peeling out. Both you and Pei Wen already mentioned some of the opportunities in these countries, but if there's any little nuggets of specific opportunities like you just mentioned, now could be a great time to mention those.
Sure. I think, Pei Wen, would you want to start with Malaysia? And then I can transition over to Singapore. No problem.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the larger opportunities is actually in electrical machinery and equipment, because from what we see from the data, from evidence itself, it's actually a #1 exports from United States to Malaysia. So we are actually guessing why this is so is because of the EV industry development in Malaysia itself. So there's a lot of EV infrastructure that is happening now in Malaysia. And this actually includes like producing the electrical vehicle charging stations, the fast chargers, as well as related equipment. So as compared to Singapore, Malaysia is actually very large in terms of land size. So there's actually need for this kind of infrastructures to be constructed along the different highways in Malaysia itself. So this actually helps. This actually lets us see that there's a huge opportunity that we can tap on for electrical machinery and equipment. So what we see is also that Malaysia is actually on track to be the electrical vehicle powerhouse in Southeast Asia in the next 10 years. And this is actually seen from different companies that are supporting the growth of this, Geely as well as Tesla from US. So this is actually something that we can tap on. We can see that this is the opportunity for North Carolina companies to go into Malaysia for this. And because Malaysia is actually a major electrical and electronics manufacturing hub in Southeast Asia itself, if you are in this industry in North Carolina, please feel free to contact us to see how we can help you export your products into Malaysia, so that there are huge opportunities for growth itself.
Thank you.
How about Singapore?
And yeah, actually, I just want to give everybody some context as well. We're just highlighting some main sectors here. You might be in a different sector. That's fine. Still reach out to us so that we can let you know whether it would be a viable opportunity or not. Singapore, very differently, I believe North Carolina already is tapping into the fact that Singapore is an aviation and MRO hub, so maintenance, repair, and an overhaul hub for the region. And there's already a lot of business going on between North Carolina and Singapore in that space. But this is expected to grow continuously over the next few years as everybody bounces back from the pandemic, travel is back on, tourism is back on. There'll be more flights. That means there's going to be more MRO services and repairs needed. So these are all intertwined. And Singapore is also an education hub for anybody in the aviation space. So another thing to consider for those in the education and training area, the aerospace is a great sector for North Carolina-based companies and anybody in that value chain to look at. The other thing is F&B and advanced manufacturing. These are two other areas where Singapore is importing a lot or setting up factories, which could be end users for North Carolina's companies. If you're targeting B2B, business to business related, if you have those kind of offerings. So F&B is a great one, and also advanced manufacturing. And within that, there's chemical processing, there is med tech and healthcare related manufacturing, there's semiconductors. So companies in those areas, in the value chains of those subsegments, should be looking at Singapore.
Right, thank you so much. Hey, Kuldeep just chimed in on the chat and asked if we can expand a little bit more on the benefits of the free trade agreement. Can you speak to that?
Question. Yeah, sure. So basically, a free trade agreement means that you can export to this side, and Singapore, because Singapore has a free trade agreement with USA, both companies can export to each other or import without any kind of without tariffs. So you don't have to worry about that particular cost, unless as opposed to shipping to a country where there is no free trade agreement with the US, where then you might have to shell out costs on tariffs and sending products to that place.
All right, so you're more competitive in the market from the start. Correct. Compared to those that are exporting from countries that do not have that benefit. So that's another pointer to a good place to start. Yes. With exports in the region.
And another thing to build on that, or another point on top of that, is all the ASEAN countries. So the Association of Southeast Asian Nations is an economic free trade bloc. So you have, Singapore, because it's part of ASEAN, and so is Malaysia and all these other countries, they can send goods and products to each other without any kind of tariffs. So if you're bringing your, because USA has a free trade agreement with Singapore, you can bring your product here, and then it's just free to, if you want to further export it from Singapore to nearby markets, you can do that as well.
Great, thanks. And how about the regulatory requirements? Are there any synergies across countries in your region as far as just duplicating regulatory requirements, or is that where it would need to be country by country by country, regardless of industry?
Good question. Yeah, this is where it differs. So really good question, Melissa. it all differs regulatory wise, regulations depending on your industry, and each country in ASEAN. So for example, let me give an example. Singapore's version of FDA, the HSA, right, has a very different set of rules compared to Thailand's FDA, right? So if you're bringing in healthcare products, or medtech products, or medical equipment into these countries, these, Singapore and Thailand, or Singapore and Malaysia, will have different requirements from a regulatory perspective. Same thing for food. It could be very different. So yes, that is something to think about. And this is where we can help you understand what the differences are between the regulations in these countries.
Yeah. So yeah, just contact a trade manager if you need information, and we will schedule an appointment for you to meet with this office and get the information you need to make your decisions. So let's transition to some of the cultural aspects of the talk, and let's start with inaccurate assumptions. Now, I think that we've talked about probably some things that would have clarified some of it, but let's go ahead and dig in a little bit on what type of inaccurate assumptions you have noted that U.S. business representatives have had prior to doing business in your region.
Go ahead, Penny.
You want to start first, Uday?
No, that's fine. Go for it.
Don't be shy. Don't be shy.
So I think I can talk about this funny thing that happened to me when I was in North Carolina, because I'm a Singaporean, and I had businesses in North Carolina who came for the consultation, like one-to-one session, and they saw me immediately and they thought of Crazy Rich Asian. Not sure if you have seen this movie. So this is quite funny because the movie is a misrepresentation of what Singapore and Malaysia is like. So there's a overemphasis on wealth over here in the region in Singapore and Malaysia because of our high income reputation. But this also means that you're overlooking potential markets as well as ignoring segments that has unique demands. So this is something that you shouldn't overlook, and it's an inaccurate assumption that Singapore and Malaysia is wealthy. Yeah.
It's a good point. I think there's a vast demographic of people in both countries, right? It's extremely diverse, both the countries and ASEAN in general. So very good point. I think from my side, one of the things that is an incorrect or inaccurate assumption that I've heard from clients, not just from the US, but internationally, is that there might not be competition for the product in the market here, because that kind of product is not there. But that is not true. Singapore is a very fierce market. It's an extremely advanced market, and I see this a lot in the tech industry. Singapore is a fintech. It's a trendsetter, so it's so far ahead of so many other markets when it comes to financial technologies or cybersecurity, that what other markets have, Singapore's already done that 5 years ago. So, those kind of things, you can dispel this kind of stuff with just good market intelligence, just basic searches, our assistance. So it's important to not assume anything. That's the best way to go about business in Southeast Asia. Great,
thank you. Hey, Kathy, let's swing back to you. Can you tell us some, your personal story about I'm sure all of us come into situations with preconceived kind of thoughts and notions. What can you tell us about any inaccurate assumptions you might have had about doing business in the region prior to being where you are today?
I think the inaccuracy was people telling me, the length of time to get it done and get it there was not as terrible as people were telling me. Oh, it's going to take 6 months and it's going to cost this and this and this. And that's why I say to you now, don't listen to people. Get in touch with you guys and they'll put you with the right people, because it did scare me. And I thought, and then, we have something here that I didn't know we had until you guys. And that was the, what is the name of it? That safety company. I mean, your company that helps if people don't pay. If you take a credit
Bank.
card or something happen. You know, it really, really eased my mind to go ahead and do it, because that is one of the things people here do fear, is what happens if I don't get my money? It could put me out of business. And believe me, you know, it's amazing what you do to help us get over that. And I think that's one of the big reasons a lot of people don't do it, because
Right. So
they don't know that there's help.
yeah.
So,
There's help with that. So I'm sorry, Kathy, for interrupting. I just wanted to clarify.
Go ahead.
So are you using Export-Import Bank credit?
I haven't had to use it yet, but because you don't have to get it and then pay every month. The way it works is when you need it, it's there, and you get with them, and that, you know, and you do what you have to do, but they get a little piece of the action for going in there and doing it. And it's amazing just to have that piece. You know, when you watch this leave your warehouse, you don't have that fear anymore that, okay, this is it. If I don't get paid, I'm dead. Because not everybody prepays. I have been so lucky, because the people, you know, I've dealt with Spain, Singapore, Canada, all these different places. And so far, they've all prepaid us, and the money was in the bank for whatever left. But that's not always the case. As you get bigger and grow, it's just like anything else. You know, people want 30 days or whatever. But that's where the XM insurance makes you feel okay about it. So I love it. And if people don't know you explain what it is if they don't know what it is. It's awesome.
Yeah, and so what I'm going to give a plug then for a couple of follow-on webinars. So EXIM Bank is a U.S. federal government agency that supports U.S. companies that are exporting in a couple of different ways. One is to protect you from non-payment. Another would be to give you an opportunity to offer credit terms instead of cash only with a new customer, to give you that competitive edge. Coincidentally, the cost of using XM can be reimbursed through our grant program. So 2 upcoming webinars where you can find out more information. September 26th, as I mentioned earlier, we have the webinar that will explain the upcoming new fiscal year grant offerings in the procedures rules. And then our October Export Coffee Talk is going to be a panel where we very briefly cover each one of the grant offerings, which includes XM Bank. And any one of your trade managers can also make an introduction to you to the representative that can speak offline. So sorry to digress from that, but that was lovely for you to bring up, Kathy. I appreciate it. So Uday and Pei Wen, let's transition to some challenges that should be noted. So Uday, can you start us out with some challenges that we should just know about, be prepared for when doing business in Singapore?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got 3 main ones, right? And I think you can use these 3 for across the region, but Pei Wen might have some other ideas for Malaysia. But even though Singapore might be one of the easiest places to do business in the world, everybody speaks English. You know, it's easy to enter and exit. It's still a place where you want to vet your partner. You want to, you know, collect the right amount of information before you enter the market. You know, is your product even viable here? Is there going to be too much competition already? You know, does it make sense? Is it a better place to go to than, say, Thailand, which might not have a, you know, similar product that you're offering already in the market? So, you know, do your market research for Singapore as well, even though it's an easier place to do business. Regulations wise, Singapore can be very stringent on you know, you following the law and making sure that you know, you are fully accredited before you can sell into the market. So, you know, maybe healthcare, pharma, if you're in that space, food and beverage, you might need to look at your you know, whether you can sell to the market before any kind of regulatory approvals. And you know, it is one of the other things is making sure that, you know, you vet your partner, you don't trust anybody just blindly, right? Develop that relationship with a partner or distributor who you're talking to. Make sure that you invest in that, and so the same rules apply in many of the other markets. But these would be my main ones. These are the areas where people have had challenges here. One other thing is, a cookie cutter approach is not usually the best one. So you have to make sure that you are flexible a little bit, depending on your product and industry, of course. But yeah, it's the market has different demands, and it's good to understand those demands before you move in.
So Uday, could you explain to the participants how your firm could assist with some of that due diligence? Like, what can you do on in the back office there where you are? I know that we have the market intelligence research that you can offer, finding potential partners. So we start with a long list, going back and forth, vetting this list until you come down to a small list. What do you do to help ensure that these potential, partners are viable businesses?
Yeah, actually, I think you just answered your own question there, Melissa. But so let's start with, if you're a company that has zero idea about Singapore or ASEAN in general, but you're very keen to come in, the first thing we would do is we would do a market intelligence report, a market assessment report, see if there are opportunities here for you. Because if there are not, then why waste time, right? But if there are, then what's the next steps? And usually the next step is to get a partner, a distributor or retailer. And like Melissa was saying, we would create and research and create a long list of prospects for you, and do that B2B matchmaking, vet them based on your criteria, what's important for you, and then give you, arrange the meetings for you. So that's usually the process. If you already know somebody here and you want us to do some due diligence on them, we can do that in the background. Interestingly, what we have faced many times is, people would have an existing relationship here, but, they've lost contact with them, or that partner has stopped communicating, or, the relationship has gone cold. So those are some of the things that we have seen companies face. And those are areas where we can help in, knock on the door, make a few phone calls, and, see if we can revive that kind of relationship for you. So that is also the assistance that we can provide across the region.
Great, thanks. Pei Wen, can you speak about Malaysia and anticipated challenges we should, just be prepared for?
Yeah, sure. So it's different from Singapore in terms of language and cultural diversity. So while you see that English is actually widely spoken in Singapore itself, Malaysia is actually the official language is actually Bahasa Melayu. So there are actually different ethnics and cultural groups in Malaysia. So you have to be very conscious of yourself when doing business in Malaysia, and understanding the local customs itself is actually important when you are talking or negotiating with partners in Malaysia. So a large part of the country is also Muslims. So I'm not sure if you know what Muslims is. So they are actually and how do you say? So Muslims are actually a group of people in Malaysia whereby they will need to abide by the halal laws. So for example, if you have a business lunch with them, you need to make sure that the place that you are going to is actually halal certified. They can't eat things that are not halal. So it means that the restaurant itself needs to be halal certified. So that's something that you need to take note of if you are going to have lunch with them in Malaysia. So another thing is about the infrastructure in Malaysia itself. So some of you might have came to Singapore for holidays, and you see that there's a lot of public transport that you can actually take. But as compared to Malaysia itself, major cities like Kuala Lumpur, which is the capital state of Malaysia, is actually very well developed. So they have train stations all over in Kuala Lumpur itself. But another region in Malaysia, for example, Alor, might not have the same level of infrastructure, and you will need to have a car in order to travel in that region itself. You might also need to think about the logistics and distribution if you are doing businesses in this area itself. So the last one that I want to talk about is about corruption perception itself. So I think all of us know that US businesses will need to be vigilant in adhering to this kind of ethical business practices. So sometimes you might have someone, a friend, who tell you that, oh, it's all right, you can actually maybe put some money on the table in order to make any bureaucratic tapes like go away, or like make things faster, make those time-consuming things like faster. It is actually not true, not supposed to be done in Malaysia. You need to understand the local law itself and not use this kind of like money on the table to make all the processes or regulatory processes much faster. So gift-giving practices, no, you need to ensure that it's actually a transparent business transaction, and don't conduct any bribery or unethical behaviors, even though you are in a country that like a friend of yours might tell you that it's okay to do so. It's absolutely not okay. Yeah.
That's a great point. And, it shows you the difference between these two markets. In Singapore, you will not face that at all. There's no red tape. Everything is really efficient. It's a brand spanking new country, right? Compared to Malaysia. Things are very, very efficient. And one important point that Pei Wen brought up was the cultural diversity in Malaysia is a lot more prominent. So for example, you do need to cater to the Muslim majority in Malaysia. You need to make sure that your products are halal certified, and have that stamp before they can be sold in Malaysia. It's not the case in Singapore, where even though Singapore has a very diverse community as well, you don't necessarily have to get halal certification if you don't want to target everybody, right? So these are some of the nuances that do exist between the two countries. A quick bit of trivia for everybody: Singapore used to be a part of Malaysia before 1960. It used to be part of the same country under the old English colonial powers.
Very good. Good, thank you. So we have about 10 minutes left. I had a couple questions left, and I think that we can combine them. So we'll have a few minutes at the end to scroll back through the chat and answer some questions. So I wanted to make sure that we touched on whether anyone on the panel or anybody on the call at all has, witnessed or made a mistake culturally when doing business between the United States and Southeast Asia, and then just general additional cultural tips. So I'll just leave it open for whomever. We could maybe flip it back over to Pei Wen to start us out, and then everybody just chime in on that last topic before we open it up for questions.
Actually, I can share something. We had I'm not going to name and shame our client, of course, but we had a client who had a very good partner in Singapore for many years, and they through the years with that partner, they gained a substantial market share for their product, which was coming in from another market. It was a meat product into Singapore. So they built this a very strong base over the years, to the point where at a certain juncture they felt they didn't need that partner anymore. So they said goodbye. And what happened after that was every year they started losing market share. And then they hired us to find out what happened. What happened was we found out that relationship that they had with their partner in Singapore was so important, because that person on the ground was keeping their sales channels alive. They were developing other relationships with other distributors and retailers, communicating with them on behalf of this particular company. And all of a sudden that person was gone, and all the other stakeholders started going to other sources for business, right? And so they saw a gradual decline in their market share here. So main lesson from that, having a good partner on the ground is not only important in this market, but absolutely crucial, especially if you're not deciding to set up a big office here or whatever it is, right? If you're looking to just export, that's going to be critical.
Thank you.
I think on that note, it is important to build the relationship, as Uday mentioned earlier. So you need a lot of time to establish this kind of personal connection, engage in small talk with like whoever partner that you are talking to, develop this kind of trust before you dive into the business matters itself. Yeah. And you need to be a little more flexible and adapt to different circumstances. Because in ASEAN itself, there is a lot of cultures, a lot of languages. There's different languages in all 10 countries itself. So you need to understand and respect this kind of local customs in all the countries and protocols, and then you adjust the business approach accordingly to what is appropriate for each of the countries. Yeah.
Kathy, can you chime in and tell us even more? I think beyond just having your products sold in the region, I think you have like a specific venture in manufacturing, something happening even more detailed where you might shed some business culture tips to the participants. Can you dive in a little bit on that?
I mean, the people that I've dealt with have been absolutely incredible. I have not, and this is the truth, I feel blessed because everyone that I've dealt with over there, and it's really amazing because I do sell to other countries, and there was one country I sold to, not in your group, that was one of the worst experiences. But they're noted for that, this particular country. I'm not going to name any names. But it's like sunshine working with you guys because, you know, I'm in North Carolina. I'm from New York, and I'm Italian. So when I first came down here, people treated me like I was an alien or something because they didn't know me. But it's the same thing dealing with people over there. You just, make it your business to learn a little bit and how you need to be. You don't need to be flying off the handle. Sometimes you might miscommunicate because of the language. Luckily for me, everybody I dealt with spoke English, but you're not always going to get that. And it was really, and again, I tried to read up about the area and all the different things. When I heard you couldn't chew gum and walk downtown Singapore. Now, I thought, what? But then somebody did, when I asked Mr. Chang, he said, I think that's stretching it a little far. He said, but, the point to be made was, especially in what I sell, the cleanliness. And it really came into play. And once I understood all that, and that's what you've got to do, you got to understand, and you got to get into what their needs are, not how much you want to sell and what your need is, but how can you help them? How can you make people in other places see that we're good people? And it's not all about money. Money helps, but it's about helping people. I know that my product, even over here, can help people live longer because it's taken a lot of all the bad stuff out of play. And that's it. No matter what it is you have, do they need it? Find out. Talk to them.
All right. Thank you, Kathy.
I'm just saying, guys, that's really a wonderful place to deal with. Really is. I'm lucky. So thank you. You're welcome.
Thanks, Kathy, so much. Hey, so I am scrolling through the chat and I see that a little earlier on, we had someone say they were interested in labeling, testing for food and beverage. So this is another service that Pei Wen and Uday's consulting firm offers is guidance with your labeling. So please make sure that you reach out to your trade manager to schedule an appointment to meet with them. As far as testing, if they don't know, they'll do the research to find out. So they're there to help you with that. So let's scroll and see if we do have any other last minute questions here. Please chime in, raise your hand while I'm scrolling through. Feel free, whoever on the call wants to just chime in and make comments or ask questions.
Yeah, hi Melissa. I
Hi,
just want to add, we heard that Singapore is a very clean city. Yes, but I would like to add it's a very safe city, state, and country. I remember one lady who was traveling with me to Singapore when I visited there. She said it is so safe. She had lived in Singapore 8 years. She said it's so safe that she is okay with letting her daughter, teenage daughter, to go after 10, after 12, I should say, and then she is not worried about her. So that's how I remember that comment that, and I remember traveling on the metro there. It is very, very safe place to be.
Thank you, Kuldeep. And then someone asked earlier on, are services such as transportation medical something that can transition to Southeast Asia? I'm not sure what transportation medical is referring to. Feel free to chime in. You just unmute yourself and give us a little more context so that they can answer that for you. If you're still here. I think that was Shabazz.
Yeah, I don't think he's still here, Melissa.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He's in there.
Yeah. All right. Am I missing anything? I'm just scrolling through.
No.
No. Are there any questions about countries that were not featured today? We have a couple minutes, so you can ask questions that are specific to you on the line since you took the time out of your day to come. Bill, do you have any questions? Or Mark? Feel free.
I have a question on this is Blake. For Scott, that's on here. This is on behalf of Scott, but Kuldeep and companies that they work with. But military sales going to the ASEAN market, how easy is it for the U.S. military or U.S. Defense contractors and manufacturers be able to enter in and sell within to the Singapore market? Obviously, with the free trade agreement, that's going to help lower the barriers. But are there any other hiccups that some might encounter when entering or trying to sell military products there?
Great question, Blake. I think so. For the military, it becomes a completely different game, right? It's very tender driven, extremely stringent, as you know already. Lots of regulations to follow. So even in Singapore, you will still need a partner to be able to be a part of a tender through them for the Singapore government to have a shot at any of the contracts. But it's straightforward in the sense that the Singapore government has specific a website where you go and you as a registered Singaporean company, you can put in a bid for whatever contracts they have out there. And if you want to be a part of that, you need to meet the right Singaporean partners to be then able to be a part of that bid. So that's the usual route, and there is no deviating from that.
Yeah,
and of course all the other you have to make sure you meet all the military quality levels and certifications, etc. So
but a lot of US companies do business there. I have participated almost on a regular basis at a show called Millipol Asia. That's military and police show held every other year. And it's been, I would say, more than 15 years I have been going to that show. So a lot of US companies participate in that and have successfully exported their products by participating in that show.
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Kuldeep. And I want to thank the panel. Thank you, Pei Wen. Thank you, Uday. Thank you, Kathy, for volunteering your time and your expertise for us. In closing, I want to remind everyone that might have missed at the beginning that our new fiscal year grant cycle is going to be upon us before we know it. Essentially, in your mind, just think of the beginning of October. So I think Monday is October 2nd. At that time, you'll be able to reach out to your international trade managers to let them know that you are requesting access to the application. But prior to that, we recommend doing a couple of things. First, finding out information about the grant. September 26th, again, is the webinar for that. Our grant manager, Cheryl, will be hosting that to give you all the details. Have a conversation with your grant manager. That's a requirement as part of our standard operating procedure. So make sure you're plugged in. You've had a conversation with your trade manager that covers your industry. And then you can gain more information about what the grant offerings are from our October Export Coffee Talk, which should be the second Friday of October. I believe it's actually Friday, October the 13th, but all good things. And yeah, so just reach out to any one of us. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye.